And hello, this is Eamonn O'Brien. You're so welcome to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And today we're going to talk about leadership, and in particular about communicating more effectively as a leader in a changing environment. And we have a fantastic guest who is joining us to talk about this topic today, all the way over in my favorite country in the world, France. We have John Murphy. And John, if you don't know, is an executive coach. He's a podcaster, he is a blogger, he is a speaker, and he's a fellow who helps executives to become great leaders. So John, very welcome.
Eamonn, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. Looking forward to this.
Good. So I said today I'd like to have a chat with you about what it takes to lead in these days. And one of the things that I've noticed from a lot of your podcasts and blogs is that you talk a great deal about how the environment is changing for leadership and why and how people need to adapt. What's going on there? Why are the sands shifting, if you like?
Well, I think for a variety of reasons. I think that one is that business is changing very, very rapidly, and that's true pretty much of most businesses that you come in contact with. So I think that's one factor. But I also think that with the people that we are managing today, is that the old kind of command and control of kind of yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, that day is pretty much gone. And when you're looking at the group of people, the future leaders that are coming into organizations now, they are not going to either be motivated or attracted to that sort of environment. So it's much more about engagement, and it's much more about involvement, and it's much more about getting them to buy into a vision. And all those things are so fundamental to leadership. So God be with the days where you just kind of when I started working, you kind of lived in terror of your boss.
Me too.
Yeah. So, but that day is completely gone, because to a large extent, there's a very different thinking in regard to joining organizations. Nobody is signing up for life, and that is long gone. So people see that, when I join, it's not going to be particularly about the money. I'm not saying money is not important, but they assume they're going to get paid what they are worth. And if they're not going to get paid what they're worth, they'll just go somewhere where they are. So there's much greater mobility. So that takes a very different way of leadership and a different form of leadership. So if your leadership is not about kind of painting that picture, and getting people to really buy into it and understand their part in it, then they're going to be disengaged. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge facing organizations now, is really getting managers to understand that they're not going to manage their way into the future. They've got to lead their way into the future.
Yeah, I like that a lot. In fact, I also liked a phrase that you used there just a second ago. You talked about painting a picture, and I like that. So, I mean, if you think about a modern leader today, are there certain traits that really a would-be leader really needs to work on?
Yeah, I always think it's interesting if you think back on, people that influenced you in your past, in your own past. And I think back on teachers. Go back to my days and, with the Christian Brothers in Sing Street, God bless them, and where I went to school. And if you think back on the teachers that had an impact upon you, and I think back on the ones that really influenced me, they were probably not the most technically brilliant teachers, but they made the subject interesting from their own passion, from the way they talked about it. I mean, I had a wonderful English teacher who certainly technically was not the greatest teacher. He couldn't control the class to save his life. But he spoke with such passion about literature and Shakespeare and Yeats and all these people that you just got carried up in his passion for it. And, as a consequence, we all did pretty well in that subject, which is not, is when you think about it, is not surprising. And I think when you look at that, and then you go to leadership, leaders have got to be, now you don't have to be the Martin Luther King, or the like J.F. Kennedy or some great orator that you would think of, but you do have to be passionate about what you're doing, and you do have to be able to create a picture for people that people can see where they're going. Because in the absence of a direction, of a clear picture, I'm going to decide my own destiny. And, and the chances are that's not going to be the same destiny as the owner of the business or the manager of the business. So the manager needs to be skilled at explaining it, explaining the why of it, and explaining the purpose of it, so that people can buy into the emotion, because this is not a left-brained exercise. When you talk about leadership, and very often you talk about the difference between leadership and managing. I always kind of say, and it took me a long time to learn that when I first became a manager. And it wasn't until somebody said to me, if you remember that, you manage things and lead people. And that was very helpful.
Say that again. I like that. You manage
things and process, and you lead people.
Love it.
And to a large extent, that was, I found that very helpful, because, we're very good at, particularly in large organizations, are very good at the process and the data and the information and the metrics. And, sometimes if you don't know better, you can confuse that with managing and leading people. But in fact, you're not. You're leading people. That's a right-brained exercise. You've got to engage them emotionally, or you're not going to engage them at all.
You're absolutely right.
So you really need to make sure that you are skilled at communicating the vision, that you're skilled at, getting people to understand what their part of the jigsaw is. And I always kind of think it's helpful to think about it, is that if you think about the vision for a business, and it is this huge big jigsaw made up of loads of different pieces, but understand which is my piece. And without my piece there, then that vision is not complete. And until such time as people, whether it's that way of describing it or another way that you find of describing it, until people take ownership of that little piece of the jigsaw that completes the vision, then they're not engaged. And I think that's a crucial part. And I'd also say that, explaining the vision, but also being clear about the vision is so immensely important. And so many organizations, Eamonn, that I come in contact with, when I talk to them about what's your vision, you kind of end up with this kind of funny conversation, and it obviously isn't clear. And the organizations that have it clear, you can actually see a marked difference in terms of the way people behave, because that is the context for everything you're doing.
Yeah, they can see their purpose, they can see why they should care and all the things that go with it. And actually, I'm interested in what you were saying about, the command and control days are gone, and how today it is about connecting with people first emotionally. Zig Ziglar used to talk about, people buy with emotion and back it up with logic, and all those things are 100% true. But I suspect actually, and internationally this would be true, and you would find this in France also, there are great challenges with people who've had very formalized types of schooling in getting into that mindset, because, when you go through school or university and you get marks for getting things right and for putting things in boxes and for following the logic and all that flows with that, what kind of challenges does that present for people to kind of, if you like, to imbue those different skills?
Well, it is a significant challenge, and and it's not kind of a one-day event. I go in and I tell you and I explain it to you, and therefore you will get it, and therefore you will change. And it's a bit like, I always, an analogy for me is kind of, if you play golf, which I do not well, but I still play.
I'm enthusiastically average too.
Absolutely. So, but somebody says change your grip, and you kind of, when you do kind of move to that different grip, you just feel as if you're not even going to connect with the ball, let alone hit it in any sort of direction. And you've got to get people to understand that the way they are thinking and the way they are behaving is not going to get them to where they want to get to. And until such time as people accept that, and really, really accept that, if I want to get to this great new place in the world that I want to get to in the future, how I'm behaving right now is never going to get me there. And until such time as people really understand that at an emotional and an intellectual level, then nothing changes. And I think that's true of, most habits that we have in life. Until you actually really believe that, fundamentally you really believe this is actually not going to serve me well going into the future, then you've got to do it. But then you've also got to be clear about, excuse me, what have I got to change it to? So it's not just disturbing somebody sufficiently to change. You've got to be clear about what you need to change them to. And when I work with teams, the thing that I spend so much time on is about behavior. And,
Yes.
And it's, I mean, when you say, well, actually people hire you to get them better results, and I say that's absolutely true. But unless you change the behavior, you're not going to change the results. And because the behavior, how you behave as a team, how you work together as a team, is determining the results that you're getting. So if you want to change the results, you've got to come back and change the behavior. And if you want to change behavior, you've got to change how people think. And that takes time. And that takes time to shift people from one position to another so that they can actually then go and start behaving and do things differently in order to get the different result. And there's a, you know, when you're looking at the whole thing around teams, Google did a great piece of work recently. I was just reading an article by them that, you know, they set out and a huge piece of research to find what was it that would actually, that makes the perfect team. If there is such, which, well, there isn't such a thing as perfect team because it's made up of people and people by nature, and we're not perfect. So it can't be perfect, but an ideal team. And when they actually did all the research with it, and they spent a long time doing it, the one thing they came back to was that unless you create trust in the team, and that team is a safe place to, you know, put your hand up and say, I'm stuck, or I'm worried, or I'm not sure, or I'm in trouble, or I need help, or, you know, do you need help, Eamonn, if you're on my team? So that you have that trust that you can be vulnerable in that team, then you're never actually going to get the sort of team that is going to produce the outstanding results. It's not, I mean, if you look at a sporting metaphor that, you know, we've seen teams in the past in football that have hired the great superstars and put them together, but they don't have a team.
Yeah.
And so it's not about necessarily the brightest and the best, but it's actually getting the best combination of people working together and all of them understanding how they need to behave in order to achieve their goals. And that's the job of the leader. That's the job of the leader. And if the leader does not get that part right, in truth, he won't get any of it right.
Yeah, it's a bit like your analogy of the teacher earlier on. It's about molding and shaping and enabling. And actually, I suppose then, if we were to put this into more tangible terms, for people who want to become better leaders, but maybe they're kind of stuck with the, you know, sometimes it all seems a little overwhelming. and if you were thinking about maybe 2 or 3 things, easy things that you could do to build on or to boost your team building capabilities, where would you be looking?
Well, the first thing that I would do, I mean, if you want to try and engage the team, the first thing you have got to be the, if you like, the guardian of the vision. So I'd have conversations with people, kind of, where are we going? And even if you haven't got it fully crafted, then, you know, bring the team together and get them to help craft it. And, you know, you don't have to be the great presenter or the great facilitator, but just do it as you are, because it's not that you've got to become a certain type of leader, because great leaders come in all shapes and sizes. You know, there are some great leaders that are great orators. There are some great leaders that are appalling orators, right? But because they are so true to themselves and they're so passionate about their subject matter themselves, they just you know, draw people to them because of their passion. So I would say, you know, start focusing on the vision and then just getting the team to talk about, well, how can we make this come alive? How can we actually really, really make this come alive? What are the things that we need to do over the next 3 to 6 months, and who's going to be responsible for it in the team? And gradually build up your own confidence in communicating with the team in this way, because very often we don't have those conversations because it's not something that we kind of feel really comfortable doing. And I'm saying just be a bit uncomfortable doing it first, and then make sure that everything you're doing and how you're behaving is congruent with the vision and the values that you're talking about. But, you know, the interesting thing is that I found when you put a team together that have not really spent a lot of time talking about vision and values, it's a little awkward at the beginning, but, you know, by God, they get into it. And when they get into it, they've created something for themselves, and we don't destroy things that we make ourselves. And I think that that's the true role of the leader, is actually getting them together to create something great for themselves.
Absolutely, and all the ownership that goes with that. And actually then, to kind of round out, because I like that notion, where does the role of story come into all of this? Because we're talking about the emotional connection, and I know you and I talked about story quite a few times recently at professional speaking events, but where and how do you think story fits into this mold?
Well, I think that when you're actually talking about behavior, the best way of actually talking about behavior is to talk about it in stories and to give examples of it and to talk about certain situations that happened. And it could be something that you've experienced or that you've observed, or it can even be a story that you've seen on a television or a movie or something like that. But people remember stories. And I always find when I'm talking about behaviors, when somebody, okay, so we talk about we are going to hold each other accountable. I say, okay, well, what would that look like? Give me an example. Tell me a story about where you saw it really well or where you saw it really badly, right? And I don't care if that's actually, as I say, a real event or it's something that you've seen on television. Because people then, once, if I say the word to you, accountable, I know what I mean by accountable, but you could actually have a different meaning to it. But if we start swapping stories about, well, what do I mean by that? And what would that look like when we play it out? Then it becomes so tangible and so real. And that's what actually cements into the mind. So I will always get people to, when we talk about behaviors and that, let's talk about examples of what it would look like. What have we seen that's been good? What have we seen that has been not so good? What would be great for us? And even when you're talking about it, working together, we said, yes, we're getting much better at this behavior. Well then, what would it need to look like if we were to get even better? What would we be doing different? How would that look? Tell me a story about how that might look in a situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, in fact, that even goes back to the point that you made at the outset about painting pictures, because if you can see it, you're more likely to remember it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's round out, if you like, then maybe on just a few quick questions for you. We've talked about the importance of leading others by talking about outcome and other things. But in terms of people that inspire you and examples of people you think, now they've done an awesome job, who fall into that category for you?
It's interesting that it's very often very. And when you think about the examples that come to mind, they are very different people. I mean, one of the people that I find fascinating is Richard Branson, right?
Yeah.
Not only for kind of the business and success he's had, but also he's just got this great ability to be imaginative. And when he talks in pictures. And I also love listening to him talk because he does that. And I could understand him really engaging people at an incredible level. I mean, I do find him quite extraordinary. I also did find the late great Stephen Covey, who was somebody that I loved listening to because there was an authenticity about him, and there was, he spoke so much of the truth. In as far as he saw it, and I just think that the more I think back on the book that he wrote about 30 years ago, the 7 Habits book, it's still as relevant today as it ever can be. And they're two kind of very different people. I mean, other people that I find kind of quirky and fascinating is the likes of Michael O'Leary, because the one thing I'd say about O'Leary is that he has been absolutely consistent. Yeah, absolutely, and people like consistency. One of the things that's, and I know from coaching people, is that if a manager flip-flops, people get uncertain about it. But the one thing you'd say about O'Leary, would I want to work for him? Questionable, right? But I admire him as a leader of people, right? Because I think that he really has set a stall out. He's absolutely consistent and he stays with the same message. And you absolutely know what you're getting and he's authentic. And that's what I like about him.
Well, he surely is all of those things and more. but I take your point also. I don't know that I'd want to be there for the Monday morning meetings, but I think the consistency is hugely important. And then maybe just one final question for you. So if you think about all the things that you've learned about what it takes for someone to lead others, to influence, to win trust, what is the one thing that you know now that you wish you had realized eons ago?
I wish that I had learned that leading was much more about serving.
Yeah.
And that would be a big learning. I have learned over the years and through my corporate career, where I went through the very traditional corporate career, going right through from, starting as a salesman, sales manager, sales director, marketing director, managing director, and through all of those. And when I look at the way company structures are drawn, with the MD at the top and everything like that. I always think it should be the other way around, because leading is about serving your people. It's not about controlling them. And I think that, if I knew that earlier, it would have saved me a lot of pain and a lot of wondering why I wasn't getting it right. And to be honest with you, that would have served me most of all, because the role of a leader is to serve his people. It's not about the authoritarian, as it come back to this old command and control thing. It's actually about serving the people, but you serve your people by leading them, but you are serving them.
Yeah, and actually that's a terrific way in which to finish, because it's almost Jesuitical, actually, which is a man or woman built for others, because that's really what it is about, where people see that you're working in their best interests and therefore not against them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, John, I knew this would be an awesome conversation. Can I thank you for joining me from a very sunny France? I know you think that 22 degrees doesn't count for much, but for over here, it's positively tropical.
Eamonn, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And if you'd like to know more about John, you'll find links at the bottom of this blog post, and please do check him out. And his podcasts and his blog posts are well worth checking out too. So please do that. And can I thank you for listening in again today to the Expert Series. And until the next time, here's to awesome speaking.